Good morning, everybody. Hope you are all well. Welcome to our fifth webinar now. It's certainly a new world for us at the National Association of Jewellers. Webinars so far, we've touched on first steps in e-commerce. We've gone into some social media. We've gone into some insurance and also introductory to gemology yesterday. But this is the first sort of look as picking up some of the research that's been taken place into the jewellery industry now, just to try to take a temperature on what everyone's doing and what the current situation is. So thankfully, before we head into the bank holiday weekend, quite an unusual bank holiday weekend under the circumstances, it's quite timely to be able to see what the research that Ruth and Siobhan at Retaill Jeweller have been conducting. I think the questionnaire has been open for a few weeks now, and it will remain open. So first sort of plug to, if you haven't responded to that survey, and we'll get a link on here at some point, and if you can take the time to do that, then please do. It's fantastic to see everyone checking in the chat. Please continue to do so. Tell us where you are, tell us what you're doing. I'm going to just drop a poll up there now just to see what type of organisation you're representing. So are we retailers, suppliers, valuers? So I'm just going to post that up now. If you could fill that will help the guys in terms of some of the answers that they're responding to. It's great to see some familiar names as well. Thank you for the ongoing support from people who are dialing in. And welcome back, Simon. Simon Forrester, I can see he's dialed in as well. It's great to have him back on board. The Better Business webinars that we've been running are here to support you as individuals and your business at this time. The NAJ is not only just doing the webinars, we also have the coffee mornings as well on a Monday and a Wednesday. So Monday's bank holiday means that Monday won't be running, but 10 to 11 till midday, Monday and Wednesday. Those on our What's On pages. We'll get that link up on the chat as well. There's the other good news that I think I've got to share is that throughout this week you would have seen coming through press that ourselves, other authorities, organisations in the jewellery industry are working together to provide a single resource. So whether it's free education that's been made available, whether it's free resources, tools, business planning, understanding government updates, that's all available on naj.co.uk/jeweller support network. Response to that has been absolutely fantastic. If you see things that are relevant to other areas, to other members of the industry, and you think it's worthwhile, please drop us a line, email marketing@naj.co.uk, and we will add that to the list. It's really a resource for everybody in the jewelry industry, no matter who you are, no matter what type of business you are. We're all trying to pull together and support one another at this time. I am going to just hand across very shortly to Ruth and Siobhan. So slides are coming up now. I'll let you guys introduce yourself. Over to you.
Hi, morning everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar and for taking the time to find out about the survey that we've been running. As Ben explained, this is a bit of a snapshot of the survey that we launched on the 23rd of March, and it will continue to run. So we're going to keep taking snapshots, as obviously we appreciate that this is a fast-moving situation, and things are sort of changing all the time. There's been some changes to things that have happened even since we collected this data. So so please do, even if you have answered it, please go and answer it again if things have changed within your business, so that we can keep monitoring the situation. We wanted to launch it to gather information on how the industry has been responding. We looked at areas such as which businesses have been forced to make staff cuts, whether those who have shut their physical stores are still continuing to trade online. And also a big part of it was whether or not the industry believes the government is doing enough to help, and if we need to do anything, you know, if we should be doing anything more as an industry to sort of lobby the government in certain areas. So the snapshot that we're looking at the time between the 23rd of March and the 2nd of April, which was last Thursday, we'd had 164 responses to the survey, which is quite a lot for typically when we do these surveys. This was actually a higher number, so that was positive to see. And representing all regions across the UK, including Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Of those respondents, the largest group, so 46%, were independent retailers, and then the next biggest group, 13%, was manufacturers. And a key thing to mention here is that 2/3 of those that responded to the survey, so over 2/3 actually, 71%, were key business decision makers, so our managers, management level or above, so business owner, chief executive, etc. So it's obviously the people that are making the sort of the main decisions within those businesses. So it was good to be able to hear from them.
Hi everyone. So overall, the mood of the survey was understandably anxious, with a staggering 89% of respondents saying they were either worried or extremely worried about the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses. Words used to describe the situation in the survey range from extremely concerning to devastating and hugely unstable to the apocalypse. One respondent simply wrote, "God help us all." Of those responding to the survey who have physical stores, 52%, so nearly half, at 45% of that, said they had already shut their premises before they were told they had to by the Prime Minister on March 23rd. Elsewhere, with retailers forced to shut, many businesses have been forced to furlough their workforce, and some do not have the capability to continue to trade online, while others feel that doing so is not appropriate in the current climate. Of those retailers which have e-commerce sites, around half, at 56%, are continuing to accept orders, although some say this might not continue.
So obviously, declines in revenue were already pretty evident, I think, prior to forced closure. So we asked the response to the survey to estimate, if they were retailers, to estimate what percentage their sales were either up or down by compared to the same time last year before they closed. And as an average, it came out as 67% down compared to the same time last year. I mean, for some, the figures were a lot more extreme. We had one respondent say that they were 90% down over the 3 weeks prior to shutdown, and another business told us that they were 95% down year on year, and described reductions in revenues as dramatic. Online sales were also not immune to the impact of coronavirus. And again, when we asked people to estimate, they said they were down by an average of 41% compared to the same time a year ago. Now, that might have changed because I've seen some figures come out this week from the IMRG saying that actually after a sort of bad couple of weeks, online sales are starting to come back a bit. But I think that generally, you know, a lot of people are in a precarious employment situation at the moment, so that will have a knock-on effect on spending. So I assume that online sales will probably still be down compared to this time last year, but whether it will be as much as the 41%. So with physical stores closed, many manufacturing facilities not currently operating, 48% of businesses that responded said they were making use of social media to stay in touch with clients. So that seemed to be quite an important area. Just because obviously time's moved on a little bit since we conducted when we took the snapshot of the survey, I was just going to pop a poll question up to ask if these figures are roughly in line with the experience of those on the call. I think 63% of you have said yes. And 33% of you said actually no, what you've experienced is that the figures were actually higher than that. So that's quite interesting to see, but interesting to know that the majority is sort of in line with kind of what we found in the survey.
Yeah. So while suppliers and manufacturers continue to battle with the knock-on effects of factory shutdowns in Asia, their problems have now been exacerbated by the closure of non-essential retail here in the UK. Some manufacturers continue to operate with a skeleton staff where it is safe to do so, while others have completely closed. One respondent that we had on the survey explained, as no retailers are open at the moment, there's no orders for wholesalers or manufacturers, so as a result we are closed. On the survey, less than half of all manufacturing or supply businesses, that's 42%, are still operating, providing that they can do so safely. Of those which are operating, 45% said they have reduced opening hours, and 57% saying it's taking longer than normal to process orders. While some manufacturers are endeavouring to stay open in order to keep revenues coming in, the lack of orders from retailers is having a notable impact on workflow, as is the closure of the majority of the UK's assay offices. I know the situation with the assay offices is changing. Birmingham assay office has reported today they may be open. However, when we conducted the survey, they were closed. One manufacturer says 80% of the retailers we supply were closed by lunchtime on Monday, March 23rd, and another added, the lack of hallmarking services is having a massive impact on our business.
A large part of the survey obviously focused on the government's response to the pandemic and sort of the packages of support they've offered to businesses which have been impacted. Half of the respondents in our survey, 48%, or almost half, said that they thought the government is actually doing enough to support businesses affected by coronavirus, although there were areas where people believed the government could be doing more. Almost a quarter of respondents cited rents as an issue and an area where the government could be doing more, with one retailer telling us the government has done loads of great stuff, but supporting tenants and landlords by subsidising rent now we have an enforced closure would be helpful. 43% of respondents said there needed to be more help from the government for self-employed workers, with one self-employed agent telling us some of us have limited revenue reserves on which to live. So again, another poll here. Do you think this is still the case, or do you think the government needs to be doing more to make accessing the support easier? Because I think as well, there were some things like the business loan interruption scheme, and when that was announced, people had some problems getting hold of it, and the government made some amendments to that, which was meant to make it easier. But I think, you know, there's still feedback around things like rents where the government could be doing more. So yeah, I mean, the answers coming through on the poll, 57%, or more than that now, 60% of you think that the government could be doing more. And 24% say that the support measures have been positive, and 15% of you saying not sure there could be more support in certain areas.
So, going back to the survey, a quarter of all businesses, so 25%, were already reporting staff cutbacks to their businesses as a result of COVID-19. So we are talking about actual redundancies here that have been made, not staff that have been furloughed. And it's clear that if the industry is to bounce back from this crisis, it will require rapid and effective support from the government. So if we have another poll now, so the next question is, have there been any redundancies from within your business? But this doesn't include furloughed staff, please. Okay. Ooh, whopping 79% at no, just 4% at yes, and 18% saying not applicable on this, but that's quite an impressive no at 76%.
Yeah, I mean, that would suggest that, you know, where people have had issues keeping staff on, that a lot of them have hopefully been using the furlough scheme, which is sort of in line with what our survey said as well. Sorry, I feel like I'm on Family Fortunes, our survey said. Yeah, reassuringly, yeah, 75% of those surveyed said they were using or planning to use the government scheme for furloughed workers to try and minimise the impact of COVID-19, and were quite positive in their comments about the furlough scheme. And also, yeah, I mean, some people really positive. We had one respondent say that the government's response was remarkable, and another saying, I'm confident that the government is keen to try and help businesses. We even had somebody who said that the Chancellor Rishi Sunak was the best politician that they'd ever seen. So some people really quite emphatic in their support of the government.
Yeah, and yeah, just to continue that, there's been a lot, we've we've just taken a sample here of some of the quotes that we've had, and as Ruth says, there were some very positive comments about the government, and generally quite positive, with some saying we're trying to be proactive on social media and by keeping in touch with clients, and by supporting each other, we'll find a way through this. We must do what we can to be there for each other. There were obviously some very negative comments. Our sales are 95% down on year on year. It feels like the apocalypse. Mixed, as we say, about the government. Some were saying that maybe business rents need addressing as well as business rates. Perhaps they could cancel VAT rather than just defer it. The government has offered remarkable support. However, this will need to continue for a long time after this situation. So just a sample of some of the quotes that we had.
So we are going to take some questions in a minute, but this is, I just wanted to reiterate that this is just a small snapshot of the survey with kind of some of the headlines. I think that we are going to make these figures available after this webinar, but if you want to sort of get the full results of the survey, we are releasing a fully downloadable booklet that is completely free to everybody, which has the full publication of this snapshot of the survey together with some other information and advice, and that's going to be available from the Retaill Jeweller website from next week, the end of next week. As I said at the beginning, we are going to continue to run the survey. So, and we'll put some more information out about how to fill that in so that we can keep kind of updating as we go along, and we'll change and alter some of the questions accordingly based on sort of the situation now. And just wanted to ask a quick poll question, which is being popped up there on the right already. How did you hear about the webinar? Just so for our own information. So if you could answer that, that would be great. And then I think Ben's going to tell us about the questions that we've got. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth and Siobhan, for that, that insightful look to see what the sort of the headlines are from the research. So at this point, I'll talk a little bit, but while I'm talking, if you do have any particular questions, if you could start to post those on the chat function now, please. That'd be quite useful. I'll hand those across to Ruth and Siobhan shortly. A couple of things to reference. So webinars leading into next week that we're hosting. Stephen Webster is hosting a jewellery journey. So 12 pieces that have inspired his jewellery journey on Tuesday. And then we've got David Ruff hosting a panel that includes Jayan and the editor of Metal Focus on Thursday. Thursday morning at 11, who is going to talk about how prices of materials are changing and what the outlook looks like there. So that's two to plug. See some questions coming in now. So from Simon, has anyone tried testing brand clones? This might be a question for the chat rather than for Ruth and Siobhan. Are there any challenges facing you as businesses being able to get access to them? It'd be interesting to hear some of the challenges and some of the successes, perhaps, in being able to access those. Question for Ruth and Siobhan: how long do you think it will take for things to get back to normal? Well, and obviously businesses have lost the second quarter of the year. The implications now heading towards the third quarter. Have you got any observations on that?
Yes, I mean, it's really difficult to say because this situation is changing all of the time. I read something online yesterday from a doctor who's been quite sort of accurate on sort of predicting things and looking at kind of what's happened in other countries. And his prediction was that non-essential retail would start up again on the 18th of May, but I don't know how accurate that is. You know, I don't know the science behind what he's basing that on, but he's just been quite accurate with those sorts of things up till now. But whether, you know, I still think there'll be nervousness even when stores are allowed to open again. I think there's still going to be a lot of nervousness from people around going out in public and especially to busy places. So it will probably take longer to return to normal. There's some stats coming through now about online sales starting to pick up again over the last couple of weeks, and a report that we published on our website this morning regarding luxury sales, people who have been treating themselves in this time and sort of spending a little bit more on luxury online. But obviously the issue that we've got in our sector is that not all jewellery businesses have websites, and not all of them have kept operating their websites because they haven't been able to, or not felt that it's safe to, since they've closed. So that's quite tricky as well.
It's a wait and see, unfortunately.
So it seems that there's one question with the research. What intelligence have you guys been able to develop for particularly directors? So we've got a couple of questions coming in for, say, startups, for example. Is there any understanding or intelligence or even barriers that you guys have found that are able to support directors in their current role at the moment? Because some of the schemes, or many of the schemes that have been made available, they're not wholly relevant for that particular person in a company. Have you, with the research or any of the feedback, have you found that at all?
Yeah, I've seen quite a lot about this, as they're like, especially with the smaller businesses, the directors kind of fall between the gaps because they're not quite eligible for the self-employed support. And I know that I have no idea if she's on this webinar or not, and that's somebody at my door. I'm really sorry. Which I won't be answering. I know that Victoria Mackay from the Women's Jewellery Network, she's been quite involved in a group that I've seen on Facebook, which is basically a collective of people who fall into that category, sort of the smaller businesses, and there's quite a lot of things that have been posted on there, and quite a lot of support and advice which I can find and send to Ben for those of you that aren't aware of it, to see if that's of use. And we do plan to hopefully get some information on that in the next issue of the magazine as well.
Yeah, and if there are, so there's some calls from the chat here for particular questions within that research, if there isn't already, to see if we can, almost like a director's cut, to try to understand what the state of play there is.
Yeah, we can definitely build some questions into the survey around that, because it seems to be, especially with our sector having a lot of the smaller types of businesses, it seems to be a real issue.
So I can see a question there from Jonathan about the price of gold and diamonds in the next 12 months. What I'd suggest is holding fire with that until the webinar next week with the materials experts. I think they're well placed to be able to answer that one, Jonathan. I think the comment, which is quite interesting, Emma Louise talks about a time to reset and refresh, retrain, rethink, not necessarily retrain, but is that something that you guys at Retaill Jeweller are finding, that are there certain things that the industry are doing now that may be coming through from the research, particular activities? What our business is doing? Are some of the mothballed, some are using the certain schemes that are available. Are there things that you wouldn't expect happening in certain areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think as is often the case, there's quite a big gulf between what different businesses and their approach, and certainly I've seen and heard from some businesses that are sort of trying to use this time as productively and positively as possible, putting staff through training courses. I know, speaking to some of the retailers, have fed back that brands have made a lot of their training resources available for free at the moment, so they're able to, because even with their furloughed staff, they're still allowed to participate in training, so they've been able to put staff through those sorts of courses, and they're doing things quite positively. But then at the other end of the scale, some businesses don't have have furloughed staff, don't have the resources or feel that they don't have the resources to do that much at the moment. So things have gone kind of quite quiet on that side, and it does seem to be a bit of a variation. But I think certainly if you've got the kind of the resources to be able to use this time productively, you know, certainly speaking to some businesses that are saying, and it is really hard to stay positive at the moment, especially when nobody knows what's going to happen, but saying that they're going to use this time to reflect and think about their strategy and hopefully come out of this stronger. And I do think it will make some businesses especially think about things like their social media presence, maybe the fact that they don't have a website or transactional website. It might be something that they're now really going to look at going forward.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of brands that have worked really closely with retailers as well. So I know that Rachel Galley is set up with stock where she's sending it directly out to customers, and some like Sifia Jacobs have really tried to push that as well, where they're sending it directly to Copenhagen on the retailer's behalf, but it will be assigned to the retailer's account. So there seems to be a lot of cooperation and collaboration going on between the brands and retailers, which is really great to see as well.
What about the retailers out there that are furloughed, or the staff are furloughed, and then sort of inquiries are going through from suppliers? So there's, I mean, from our challenge as a trade association at the moment is to keep communication lines open. We feel, and why the webinars are all in place, while all the coffee sessions, all the communications are there, we're absolutely determined to make sure that communication still happens. Have you guys heard about how, have you heard about the particular challenges in terms of suppliers trying to get in touch with retailers, or even the opposite? And is this something that you find at the moment is that something that the industry's challenged with, or even is this the same for other industries that you might have tapped into to see what happens? I know that NAJ, we look at the Independent Retailers Consortium, for example, and there are similar challenges between the links between the suppliers and retailers. So I'm just interested in your take on that communication, because you know we wouldn't want things to make our own challenges for ourselves, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I've certainly had that feedback from suppliers that I've been speaking to, is that, you know, they can't get through. That, you know, some retailers have literally shut up shop, and there's no sort of way to get hold of people, and I get that, you know, staff have been furloughed and that sort of thing, but with regard to, you know, you think that the business owner would still be available. And again, I think it comes back to that real gulf between some people and doing it one way and other people doing it completely different. And you've got, you know, really countless examples of businesses just look at their Instagrams being really proactive. I had an email through today from Burrell's. I think I must be signed up to their customer emails, and it was saying, you know, we've closed our stores, but we want you to know that we're still here. You can contact us if it's about a repair online, any questions that you might have about something you've bought from us. This is how you get hold of us. And it's not difficult, I don't think, to send out an email to your database. And I think we, you know, as a trade, and something that the NAJ hopefully is encouraging its members to do, is to be open about how people can get in touch with them, because I think at the moment it is really key that everybody is able to communicate.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the social media webinar that we had, David Glenwright, a lot of the Jet Business Network guys, and hello to the Jet Business Network people that are on the webinar. They'll know that his expertise in social media is really quite, it's fantastic, and he spent quite a bit of time talking about developing relationships, not necessarily boosting those sales, but being able to hold prospective customers in and around your organization by using, he divided it into value added content and self-promotion content. Your self-promotion is going to be the type of products and services that you offer, but the value added right now is, you know, we're talking about supporting the NHS. We're talking about sharing bakery open times, just so people in that local community can be supported, sharing food drives, that kind of thing. And I think that's where some retailers are really improving or scaling up that value-added content, just to develop engagement and develop those relationships with the local community. I think Sarah's just made a comment on the chat there about she's seen a significant increase in inquiries for even overhauls, not just website updates. And you can see Emma as well echoing the importance to stay connected to customers at this time. I encourage people just to post some particular questions, maybe even some of the challenges that you are facing right now, and maybe some further investigation if there are other questions that you're either looking forward to from the research, having filled it in, or even things that you think that may well go in there. We spoke about the director's cut. From the moving to when we hope things might return to normal, just to echo the jeweler support network again, ourselves and the key authorities in the industry, CMJ, Holden, Diamond Producers Association, Goldsmiths Centre, Goldsmiths Company, Society of British Jewellers. There are more. We are looking to a campaign when we start to come out of this about driving that interest towards the local jeweler. However, it's quite key that timing on that is right, because right now we've got to be developing those relationships on social media, but developing a campaign that's across the industry, it's quite delicate, and obviously we want to make sure that the timing of that is key. So right now, again, just to drop that link in, that / jeweler support network, there are handles, support your local jeweler that at the right time, but I just sort of shout to follow those now. Are there any other things that so from the research that you've conducted, are there any things that hold, if we do this again, as the situation has developed, are there other things that you'd like to ask in the future, or sort of what's the next step from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've just seen Simon asked a really good question about sort of getting a question into the survey about asking the trade what support they'd like to see from the NAJ and their partners, and if people can actually give sort of tangible examples. And again, from our point of view, we've got the means to sort of share information daily with people, and monthly through the magazine, but daily online in our newsletters. So we're going to be asking people kind of the sort of things that they want to find out from us, or examples of things that we've seen that they might like us to share as well. One thing, I don't know if people would find it useful, but we've got sort of, as part of our daily day-to-day jobs, we sort of looking at the Instagram feeds and the Twitter feeds of a lot of the jewelers across the country. So we've got a lot of examples of jewelers that have been doing things that very positive on Instagram, as you sort of things that you alluded to, Ben, like that kind of community connection, and staying sort of connected at the heart of the community, even though you might not be open. And I don't know if sort of sharing those kind of things with the trade would be useful to people.
Yeah, I'm just dropping a link onto the chat function now. I'm just going to share the slides as well for those people that will find it a useful reference from today, as well as a link to the social media video that David did for us on Tuesday. Are there any particular examples, any particular accounts that you've seen that should be followed here, Ruth? What should Sarah?
I think I've seen some good. I've seen some great sort of very small things that some jewelers have done that I thought that's a really good example of engaging content. I did have some feedback from somebody who said that they were getting from a retailer that said that they were getting a bit of backlash on social media for pushing product from people who were saying, how could we think about buying jewelry at a time like this? So it doesn't necessarily have to be just, oh, here's a diamond ring or here's a watch. I saw Spruill's Jeweller in Northern Ireland, they'd done a really nice sort of feature where they'd looked at what all of their staff were doing now that they weren't in the shop. and it was sort of, you know, one of them had been baking, one of them had been doing a garden, one of them had been doing workout with Joe Wicks. It really kind of gave a sort of human side to the staff that work in the jewelers that obviously part of that community, and that got really good engagement. And then they asked their customers to share what they'd been up to, which was really nice.
Yeah. Some have been sharing, I think it was one of the first maybe to do the any of their customers, the children, when they were doing the rainbow for the NHS, to share their pictures. I think that was going up on their post. But then even just companies as well, like we've written today about Watches of Switzerland, they've set up a virtual pub for their staff, and they're doing watch and jewellery design competitions for their staff's families to join in on. So it can be really varied, not just within the shop, it can be across businesses as well. So if you're a multiple, you can even join in on that.
So to recall out of social media for a period, just looking ahead at the forthcoming Retail jeweler articles, are you planning to sort of take the issues raised in the research head on, and if that, are there any particular topics that you've got lined up for the people on the call to sort of look forward to?
Yeah, certainly. We're definitely looking at the sort of the director issue. That's like quite a big thing that we're going to be focusing on, because I think it's so relevant to our trade particularly, because there's so many businesses that fall into that category within this sector. The other thing that Siobhan and I wanted to do to make sure that what we're writing continues to be relevant to people, we have been running a series of advice articles every day on our website, covering things like making video, social media, right through to kind of employment law advice and that kind of thing. But we want to make sure that those continue to be relevant and are the sort of things that people want to and need to know about. So as part of that, I think it's a week on Monday, so the 20th, possibly, we are participating in one of the NAJ coffee mornings as basically a question session. So we're just encouraging people to get on board with that coffee morning and ask us sort of anything that's bothering you that you would like to see us sort of finding out about, that can help inform our content to make sure that what we are putting out there to you is as relevant and useful as it possibly can be. And also we always say, like, you know, just drop us an email, put a comment on the website. If there's anything you feel we haven't covered and you'd really like us to, please let us know, because we want to ensure that we're remaining useful. Yeah,
and if there are particular, so just to echo those sort of challenges as well, I've just dropped a link on to register for those coffee or tea, depending on what your hot beverage choice is. Yeah, you can join us on those Mondays and Wednesdays, and the guys will be doing a takeover on the 20th of Monday, the 20th of April. I think there's a question here about, and I think it's quite an insightful observation about pre the shutdown. Did you get the sense that some retailers were running on skeleton staff because they weren't quite sure of how the situation was going to unfold, or was it only until the sort of the lockdown came in that sort of staff that things started to change? I'm just interested to see that sort of 2 to 3 weeks leading up to it, where there was that uncertainty, if you found that might be a reason why that figure in terms of the number of staff being laid off was so high in the webinar that the poll that we've held today.
I think certainly I've heard of that, you know, that case, you know, that being the case in a couple of situations where things were, you know, trade was down, people had a sense that things weren't as they should be, and staff actually were laid off prior to the government announcing the furlough scheme. So, but I think one of the reasons it was quite low in our poll was because most people have taken advantage of the furlough scheme where they can. I mean, I do think that there is a bit of an issue with some businesses, certainly not just in this sector, but in the restaurant sector, certainly. They a lot of staff were made redundant because small businesses can't necessarily afford to wait for the money to come from the government to pay the furloughed workers, and they'll have to pay out of their own pockets and then wait for that money to come in. And then that could cause a cash flow issue, so that might be a reason as well.
Mike, I've heard it. I think they're trying to get a screaming baby to have a nap right now. Sorry about that if there's any interference, everybody. There's a few shout outs on social media. What I'd encourage is, I know that the guys who are looking after that local jeweler account, the support your local jeweler, they are looking at there are people on this all day looking at some of the posts and sharing those, so that's a useful source and reference point for some of the examples of good practice. So thank you everybody for sharing where they've seen that. I think that there's so we've got comments here about the 50 people that have joined the webinar today. This is it's fantastic to be able to get engagement. The webinars that we've held so far have had up to 150 people, and as low as sort of 30. However, I think it's depending on the topic. Task what I would ask everybody watching today is if you could take a snapshot or take a photo of the webinar, and then if you could post that onto your social media channel. So if you could either post it onto Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, because I think the challenge here is to utilise those networks to share that this is a useful activity. And over the coming weeks, as we do look at forthcoming webinars, and we want to hear from the industry, and we utilise the things like the coffee mornings to understand some of the challenges that people are facing right now in order to put the most relevant webinars together. So if you can take that time and take a snapshot, that would be extremely appreciated. The more adventurous might choose to do a mini video, it's great as well, but it's just good to see who's out there and how you're engaging with things right now. If there are any, I'll do sort of a final questions call now, so if there are any particular questions that you're sort of waiting for, please fire them in. So are there any observations on sort of diamond supply from your side, Siobhan or Ruth? Howard's made a point about, I think the RapNet scenario is that was topical, to say the least. Have you had any sort of have you got any observations, or have you had any sort of intelligence in terms of supply prices, anything like that?
We've had a few requests from people. They'd quite, I mean, because obviously there's been statements from the World Federation of Diamond Bourses, various other bodies, and we've had a couple of people contact us to say that they would like to know specifically what the London Diamond Bourses position is on it, and so that's something that we are pushing them for at the moment, and we've just getting a statement from them specifically. I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but I think whether it's something that they're, like, as Howard says on the questions, is it something that the retailers are bothered about? I don't know. That's a question to ask the retailers, I guess, or if it's more of a supply side issue at the moment.
Yeah, it might be more a retailer that's bordering to a manufacturer that might be more concerned.
That's certainly one we'll pick up next week at the precious materials webinar, about what that looks, the challenges or expectations, or even the commentary that David and the panel comment on. So I think we're there wrapping it up now. Just to say thank you to everybody that's joined the call today and continues to join the webinars. Thank you especially to Ruth and Siobhan, who've provided the time and effort to prepare these slides, but also for the guys at Retaill Jeweller, the team behind you as well, for conducting this research. I think over the coming weeks, it's going to be a useful reference point for us all to check in. And almost sort of just to see if the decisions that businesses are making, is that in the minority, is that in the majority? So the more information that we all can pull in, I think that's going to be a really useful resource for everybody. So much for preparing this today. I don't know if for the guys, we were originally supposed to be playing golf today, we did have the NIJ and Retaill Jeweller very first golf day, which was due to take place, I think it was in the Midlands, not far from the NEC, I think, seems to remember. That's pushed back till the autumn. So for the guys that were going to join that that golf day, it's still very much in the plan to deliver this year. We may well be looking at a busy Q4 for 2020, but we do certainly, we're doing everything we can to get that date back into the calendar. Thank you everybody for the kind comments. It's good to see some familiar names joining, and please share the webinars to your own professional networks.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.